Novi Williams, the man who broke the story, joins us from the Charleston airport because, of course, Evan, what a crazy day, I'm sure, for you. Sure, you didn't plan to break the story while sitting in an airport, but alas, here you are. What can you tell us about, what you learned that made you go like, wow, okay, this is it? And it's done. Dan Snyder has has agreed in principle to sell the Washington Commanders to Josh Harris for $6 billion.
Deal has been reached, and Craig, I'm expecting this to move fairly quickly from here, get the lawyers finalizing the little details, get it to the league, and I wouldn't be shocked if this is announced in the next early next week would be my guess. And yeah, what a process. I know you've been covering it more than almost anybody. Such a bizarre situation given everything that Dan has been through, what he is facing moving forward, the way the league has treated him, the various bidders. Jeff Bezos, is he interested, is he not? A truly bizarre process, but in the end, the group that has been there since the beginning and was probably the realest of all of them ends up being the group that gets this deal done at $6 billion.
So yesterday we have the news from Puck first, which a bunch of others confirmed. And I will say, just between us and the audience, but I was like, Evan is conspicuously quiet on this news. I wonder if there's something else going on, and sure enough, you popped the story today. But a bunch of folks report yesterday that Jeff Bezos is out. On the same day, Tillman Fertitta says, I bid $6 billion or 5.6, and they wanted more, and I wasn't willing to go higher than that. Is it just kind of the realization for Dan that this was the only bid? Is that why this finally comes to a close when it doesn't feel like from Harris's side there's been much movement in months?
Yeah, I think the way that Josh and Tillman approached this was fairly similar. They just maybe had slightly different prices. I don't know for sure 100% that Josh was the last group or the only group fully at the table, but I don't get the sense that there was a lot of them. And the Jeff Bezos question obviously loomed over this for so long. He's so rich and he's in such a different position that he doesn't have to go through, as you and I have talked about, doesn't have to go through any of the processes. So the fact that he had not been engaged at all didn't mean that he couldn't call up the day today or tomorrow and get that deal done. It seemed like once definitively that Dan and his people understood that was not going to come from Jeff. I do think that made this process, I think, fairly simple. You look at who you have, you look at how many people are real, and if it's just Josh, again, that makes this process even simpler. So in the end, I don't know exactly how many bidders or how many people were real, fully financed, or whether Tillman came with an offer but didn't have all the money and just didn't feel like it was worth going down that process. I don't know, but Josh has been the group that people have been talking about the most and been there through this process, and I don't think that his $6 billion probably maybe a little bit higher than his original offer, but knowing Josh and the way that he invests, he's not someone who's going to, really splurge more than what he thinks an asset's worth. I can't imagine he went too much higher than he was a couple months ago.
Again, the breaking news earlier today, Dan Snyder has agreed in principle to sell the Washington Commanders to Josh Harris, Mitchell Rales, Magic Johnson, that group for $6 billion. Evan Novi Williams, who broke the news, is with us from Sportico. So about that group, is it just those three? What do we know about the group? I heard someone say yesterday that there's more folks involved here. What do we know about the group, and kind of, to the extent that we know anything, how it will run as an operational ownership group?
I would think almost definitely that there's more. I don't know that for sure, but I would be shocked if it was the three of them. In fact, I can almost guarantee that there are others. And oftentimes, they could bring people in even after the fact now, right? If you think about the Broncos sale, when Rob Walton got that deal done, a number of his limited partners, like Lewis Hamilton, like Melody Hobson, like Condoleezza Rice, they were announced and done after the deal was reached. So it's not uncommon to have an agreement in place, and oftentimes it's easier to raise money once that happens. It's maybe even harder for Josh to say, hey, Craig, here's what I need, we're going to make a run at this. It's easier to be like, hey, this is the deal I have. These are the economics. Do you want to participate in it? So I don't know if there are groups that have already signed on as Magic have. I don't know if there's ongoing conversations, but I would be shocked if in the end this is just a three-person group. I would almost guarantee that there's going to be others, and maybe even a significant chunk of other people as well.
So we know kind of what Josh Harris's style is, at least I know as a basketball guy, with the Sixers. I'm less familiar with how he's run the Devils, but from an ownership, a sports owner standpoint, how would you characterize / categorize Josh Harris's ownership style and how he's probably going to run this team?
He is a very prominent and very successful investor, and he is very much in this, what I would call this new class as of the last 10 years, new class of sports owners, right? It's a different group than you see largely in the NFL right now, right? There's a lot of people like Josh in the NBA side, not as many on the NFL side. He's well-versed in stadium construction and all that, right? Not only does he own the arena where the Devils play, but he's in the process right now with the Sixers of getting a new downtown arena, and that's going to be priority number 1 through 4 on the big bucket list items once this deal is done, right, is figuring out exactly what that looks like. That is going to be an extremely expensive endeavor. He obviously knows that. I would imagine one of the reasons why Josh and Mitch have a bit more partners or more they're going to announce is because this is not a deal that costs $6 billion. This is a deal that costs significantly more than $6 billion because there needs to be a new stadium and it needs to happen relatively soon. So I would bet that that's one of the biggest priorities. The NFL, as you know, is just structured a little differently from a salary cap standpoint. It's not like baseball where Steve Cohen buys the Mets and suddenly the payroll's twice as big. So it's not as though his tolerance for spending relative to his peers matters all that much from a player standpoint in DC, but it definitely matters for the stadium. It matters for things like practice facility. It matters for what you pay your coach and who your coach is. It matters for executives that you hire, all those things. And I don't expect Josh to spare any money when it comes to outfitting the Commanders in a way that puts them in a position to win.
Yeah, Eben Novy-Williams from Sportico is with us. It's worth mentioning that Harris is the guy who bought the Sixers and then greenlit the process and that whole thing, which is very different than the way the Commanders have been run, or for that matter, as I've spent the last couple of days railing about the Wizards, how any DC sports team has been run outside the Nationals recently. I don't even know how much of that was on purpose, but that's a separate conversation. We'll return to that later. On the Bezos front, he loomed over this thing from go. I remember us talking way back when, November, we talked again in January. It was still like, well, maybe he could always come in. Why ultimately, to the best of your knowledge, did he not get involved here?
I wish I had sources with direct knowledge of Jeff Bezos' thinking. The general feeling from people that are in the know at least a little bit is that he's very interested in the Seahawks. The Seahawks are currently owned by the trust of Paul Allen, and that is a team that is going to have to sell, not immediately, but my guess is some point in the next 10 years. And Jeff obviously has a lot of ties both to DC but also to Seattle. It's probably an easier transaction for him. It doesn't have to happen immediately. It doesn't get tied into all the kind of back and forth about will Dan Snyder sell to him or will he not. So I don't know exactly why Jeff chose not to bid. I honestly don't even know how seriously he considered it. But just because there was at least some sort of idea that he might be interested, I do think this process took longer than it probably would have. Certainly longer than it would have, absolutely, if Jeff had either publicly said, I'm not interested at all, or if Jeff didn't exist in that scenario.
So what are the hurdles remaining? There was the reporting from the Washington Post about the indemnification. There's kind of all these details that depending on who you ask, are really important or not that important. What hurdles remain to finalizing this thing and for Dan Snyder to no longer own the team?
From what I understand, the lawyers currently, as you and I are talking on Thursday, going through kind of the final deal point, getting the nuts and bolts on the legal side done. Once they have an agreed contract, that goes to the NFL. NFL looks through it, and then they plan to sign it, right? The indemnification is a good question. I don't know exactly where or when in that process things happen. I do know, and you know this as well, a lot of NFL owners like the idea of having a different owner in Washington. So I imagine the league is going to want to move fairly quickly. Josh is very approvable. He is already a limited partner with the Steelers. So to the extent that this is a club that is wary of who they let in, he's already got a foot in the club already. I don't know that much about Mitchell Rails' business, but my general feeling is that when you get to this point where you have an agreement in place, there's a pretty good understanding of what the other owners, what the league league are going to feel about the prospective buyers group. So I don't imagine that the approval process being any sort of an issue. I don't imagine it's going to take very long, and I don't think there's going to be any surprises when this group finally does go to the vote and the consideration of all the other owners.
And I'm assuming that'll happen at the Minnesota meetings, or will they call a special meeting potentially and do it even sooner?
Sometimes it happens faster, other times it doesn't. The fact that those meetings are happening relatively soon doesn't. I think it could happen then, but I would also, again, not be shocked if there's so many motivations right now to get this deal done. Not to mention the fact that throughout this whole process, everybody has told me, and it's honestly, it's not a secret, that Dan is a fairly tempestuous businessman, right? I think the idea of getting this thing papered, approved, sealed, and done, if there's any way to fast track that, I imagine the NFL will look at and maybe try to explore all those avenues.
All right, I'm gonna take my journalism professor's advice here and just at the end say, is there anything else that I should be asking you about, or anything else that you would like to add to this story?
No, it's a good question, and honestly, no. But I think in the coming days and weeks, I think we're going to learn. Hopefully, it's us at Sportico, but I think you're going to see a lot more about who is specifically in this group. I'm sure they're going to come out not in the next week, but at some point with a plan about what the stadium looks like and all that. But knowing what I know about Josh, I think he's probably going to move quickly. I think he's probably going to spend a lot of money in a lot of these areas to get things in order very quickly. And I'm fascinated. My question, and obviously don't have the answer, I'm fascinated to see where Commanders fans, how quickly they come back to this team. It's no secret that this was one of the most attended franchises in the NFL 10 years ago, and it was lowest in attendance in the NFL last year. There is a relationship that needs to be repaired between the Commanders and ownership and its fans, and I'm very curious if that happens automatically because someone not named Dan Snyder is owning this team, and I'm also very curious the lengths to which Josh and his group feel like they need to make those inroads and make that process back towards Commanders fans as well.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, because you mentioned the stadium, like how confident are you that Josh Harris and especially Mitchell Rales, who's so connected in DC political circles, can get the RFK site if they want it? And then also, what about I know the stadium process in Philly is super political as well. Like, how is Harris going to be able to balance those two projects, assuming they're happening at the same time?
I think you nailed it, Craig. I think one of the main reasons that Mitchell Rales is involved in this, and one of the reasons why he is such a valuable piece of this puzzle, is because of his experience real estate-wise and otherwise in the D.C. area. And I think it's also, we should not discount, again, the fact that there are a lot of politicians that did not like Dan and did not like the way that Dan ran this team, and were probably going to be a lot more amenable to having conversations with someone who is not named Dan that owns this team again. So I think there's a lot of political goodwill that this group is just going to get just by virtue of, again, not being the old people. And then, yes, lean heavily on Mitch and his connections in the D.C. area and go from there. I don't know, and I have not heard much about exact stadium sites, so I don't have anything really to comment on that, but again, I don't think whether it's at the RFK site or whether it's somewhere else, I would imagine this group is going to have what it takes to get that done and to get that process started relatively quickly.
Evan Novi-Williams broke the story for Sportico, immediately hopped on the Zoom with us here, live from the Charleston airport. Evan, appreciate you, sir. Safe travels, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you, Craig.
This is the Hoffman Show on the team.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Woo! What a day. What a day. Thanks again to Eben Novy-Williams for joining us just a few minutes ago. Eben, of course, from Sportico, the guy who initially broke the story. And as more people have gotten involved in reporting on this, I just, look, I've gotten to know Eben a little bit over the course of this process. I'm happy for my guy. Nothing he initially reported has done anything but be proven correct. It's funny as some of the other folks get involved and everyone's got their sources. I would have bet on Eben all along to be the guy to break the story, and Sportico to break it, because when it comes to these deals, like the place that you want to be locked in, if you don't have the principal owner involved, and I don't think anyone has Dan Snyder on speed dial in the media, the place you want to be locked in is the banks. And whether it's the banks themselves or people in the banking business circles, and that's where Eben and Kaplan from The Athletic, Dan Kaplan, where these guys live is in those worlds. And so I'm not surprised that everything is borne out to be true. In terms of where we are right now, I'll actually read from the Washington Post. They just updated their story. The Post, NFL Network, ESPN, all reporting roughly the same thing. An investment group led by Josh Harris has reached a preliminary agreement to purchase the Washington Commanders from owner Daniel Snyder, according to two people with direct knowledge of the sale process. Harris's group would buy the team from Snyder for approximately $6 billion if the tentative deal is finalized, according to one of those people who said the group has an agreement in principle with Snyder. Harris's group is, quote, nearing a deal, but it is, quote, not final yet, according to the other person who added that an agreement still must be submitted to the NFL. I will interject here to give a little bit of analysis and context, right? These things aren't done till they're done. They're not done until I's are dotted, T's are crossed, signatures are had. All of it is truly done, because it's just things that could go wrong. But that doesn't mean that they are on track to go wrong. It simply means that there's things that have to be done. When you get to the start line of a 400-meter race, you're in the race, but you still got to run around the track. And there are things that could go wrong. You could trip, you could pull your hamstring, whatever, along the way. You could just run a bad race. But at the end of the day, if you complete the 400 meters, you've run your quarter mile, congratulations. I don't know if that was the best analogy, but the point is, sometimes getting to the starting line is the hardest thing. And in this particular portion of the race, just getting to the starting line, being the one that's allowed to run, is the most important thing. And it looks like Harris in that group is there. And they look down the track, and there's no one next to them anymore. In terms of the price discrepancy, because Darren Haynes reported that it was 5.8. Eben reported that it was 6. This story has approximately 6. Schefter and Rappaport and Fox Business all had 6.05. All three of those outlets certainly coming from the Snyder NFL side in terms of their sourcing. My parents actually just sold their business. It is not worth remotely close to $6 billion. But there's a stipulation from what I understand in some of these sales where it's the revenue generated over the next year can affect business things. And that looks like one of the things that I think my parents were working out and signing. Hope I wasn't supposed to not say that on the radio. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. If I wasn't supposed to. But that's the kind of thing that happens in business deals sometimes is, okay, your revenue over the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years can ultimately affect the price of the sale if this is being done not as a lump sum but a payout over time. Okay, well, it's a base of, whatever billion plus revenue share over the next blank years. There's a reason. It doesn't mean anybody's wrong. What it does mean is that Harris gets to say his number to the press, and Snyder gets to leak his number to the press, and they both get to look like they did a good job on the businessing. 5.8. Oh, yeah, we got it for less than 6. We got it for my price. And Dan gets to be like, yeah, I got it for 6. Or, there's some extra asset involved, or whatever the reason is why the numbers are different. But, I wouldn't read too much into that. But those are the kind of things that happen in deals all the time. Picking up from the Washington Post story. Canadian commercial real estate developer and private equity executive Steve Apostolopoulos has also bid on the team, Apostolopoulos, I believe is the correct one, Canadian Stephen A. And according to a third person with knowledge of the process, negotiations with the Snyders remain active. Stephen A's group submitted a $6 billion bid for the franchise and earlier toured the team's facilities. Interjecting again, AJ Perez has said for a month and a half, as have others, that this guy is in it for clout. Not to say he doesn't have a lot of money, not to say he has more money than I will ever have. I'm not saying that he's not a very rich man who one day might not own a professional sports team or even an NFL team, but it's not going to be this one. He's in the middle of buying the Ottawa Senators, and his net worth is like $3.9 billion. Sure, he could have other people, very rich people, be partners, but his bid is not going to pass the vetting process of the NFL. I did my whole big, long open about how selling to someone who doesn't actually have the money and has to borrow a ton is a bad idea. And it's part of the reason why the NFL has all these equity stakes and things that you have to have in place so that you don't have some of the problems that they've had with Daniel Snyder. And it just sounds like this guy would be a lot of those same problems in terms of the financial profile relative to the net worth of the team. Continuing from the Post story, any deal would have to be ratified by the NFL's team owners, who are scheduled to meet in Minneapolis in May. If approved, the sale would end Snyder's ownership, yada, yada. Sale price would be a record, $6, obviously bigger than the $4.65 that was paid for Denver. Harris Group declined to comment. There were spokesmen. The Commanders and the NFL also declined to comment. All that stuff. So that is where we stand right now in terms of the reporting. Harris, Rails, they are going to own this team, and it is very, very likely that will happen at the Minneapolis owners meetings when it gets approved, and it's just the signing of the final paperwork. But I would imagine you hear from Josh Harris soon after that. It's also worth mentioning that Harris, as the majority owner, obviously has to go through the primary or the most vetting. He's already in the NFL ownership circles. He is a minority owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Mitchell Rails has been a very well-known figure in D.C. circles for a long time, is in charge of a lot of government-adjacent type of things in terms of like art, like National Art Gallery. I believe he was in charge of at one point. Might still be. The Glenstone is not a government site, but there's just a lot of connections that Rails has. Like there's not gonna be any problems there. And magic is magic. Artie is an owner in multiple other leagues. You're not gonna have any problems with the vetting process here. It is merely a formality at this point. Josh Harris is going to be the next primary owner of the Washington Commanders, and on some level, already is. Today's the day. I guess. Well, the business people would be mad at me saying that, but it's done. It's over. All right. When we get back here on the Team 980, David Aldrich, longtime D.C. resident, D.C. native, in the Hall of Fame, Pro Basketball Hall of Fame as a writer, came back home a couple years ago to cover everything D.C. sports and has written extensively about the sale and the Commanders. We'll get DA's thoughts on this next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
After
It's the Hoffman Show. Team 980 always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 5 o'clock each and every day. We get more insight on the top story. You know what the top story is, so let's get right to it, shall we?
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
And today it is our pleasure to welcome in our good friend David Aldridge, the Pro Basketball Hall of Famer, DC native. And he wrote about Josh Harris buying the team. And DA, we had you scheduled to talk playoffs and do all the fun basketball stuff. But I do think the top story's changed a bit, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Man.
Yeah. So. Obviously, I'm actually curious to start there, though, kind of the crossover of you're someone who's covered DC sports now, been back home doing it for The Athletic for a number of years, but long history in the NBA. You're so plugged in there. What is Josh Harris's rep? Who is the guy that just bought the Commanders from your understanding of who he is?
Well, the people that have dealt with Josh Harris that I talked to for the piece of the last couple of weeks say he is a really, really smart guy. Like, you don't have to worry about the Commanders not having, really cutting edge technology, cutting edge information. He's a big data guy. Obviously, he hired Sam Hinkie for a reason. He brought Daryl Morey in for a reason, because he likes data, likes crunching the numbers. So whatever. If you like DVOA and numbers like that in the NFL, then Josh Harris is probably going to be your guy. He's going to be well versed into all of the different types of stats and things and other things that he thinks can give his organization an advantage. Now, he works his people really hard. I mean, that's the overarching thing that I heard was that, he really, really wants to know the answers. He wants to deep dive almost everything. And if you can't give him those detailed answers, you're probably not going to be there very long. So, he's going to want to know why you're trading a draft pick. He's going to want to know what the value of the pick that you're trading is and what the value of the pick you're getting is. And, is this contract a good contract or are we paying too much? Are we paying beyond market value? I mean, he's going to be on top of all of that sort of thing. And he'll spend. He gave Joel Embiid multiple extensions, big extensions, max extensions. They were willing to bring in James Harden. I think they'd be willing to re-sign him, but James Harden may leave, but that's not because they won't pay him. So he'll spend the money, but he wants to know what he's spending his money on.
You mentioned the data analytics side of it, and you go back to the process, and that was obviously very analytics driven. And it's not like when he got rid of Sam Hinkie that he went completely the other way. Like Daryl Morey is just analytics driven as there has been. He's been at the forefront of that movement in the NBA and successful for a long time. How does that jive from what you've learned about how the Commanders organization has been run over the last decade or so since analytics started entering more of the football realm?
I mean, I think they're better. They didn't have anywhere to go but up, right? I mean, so I think they're better. I think they will. I think they'll be fine in that area. I don't anticipate that being a problem. I am not as versed about the inner workings day to day as others are. I'm looking big picture. I think the people that embrace that will find they can stay, and the people that resist that probably aren't going to be there that long because that's how he rolls. This guy founded Apollo Global. He is a big picture guy. He is going to expect results, and he's going to want to know why the results aren't forthcoming. Now, having said that, I do think he lets people do their jobs. I mean, he was almost told to hire Jerry Colangelo when he fired Sam Hinkie, and Jerry Colangelo and Brian Colangelo, and he let them do their jobs for a couple of years. But then he stepped in. He had no choice really after the Brian Colangelo kind of mess.
Right, there was that.
You know what I mean? That was just you had to do something. But he went right back to another analytics guy, right? So I mean, that's kind of his tell. It's been his tell throughout his tenure. I think he will do the same thing with the Commanders, and I think their player person people are going to have to answer a lot of questions, and their GM and their all of their all their pro scouts. I mean, he's going to drill down. He's going to want to know what's going on and why.
No doubt about it. David Aldridge with us, senior columnist at The Athletic. Speaking of big picture, let's rewind, zoom out all the way. What was your reaction when you heard the news that the deal was in place, there is an agreement, this is actually happening, and the deal is not done, but we're over the biggest hurdle?
I mean, it certainly seemed like that was the way it was going, right, for the last couple of weeks. It did not seem, once it became clear that Bezos was not going to make a bid, I mean, I think that was the one thing that people could not predict. How can you predict what somebody worth $123 million is going to do? You just have no idea. And so he was always kind of the stalking horse that could come in at any time and set it on fire. And he didn't. So once he said, I'm out, I think it certainly seems like this deal came together pretty quickly, because this is the guy that I think Dan Snyder and the league want to buy the team. I mean, the NFL is very risk averse, Craig. They do not take chances on people they don't know. They vetted Josh Harris. He tried to buy the Broncos. He is a minority stake in the Steelers. They know this guy. He obviously has the money to do it. Bringing in Mitch Rales helps, I'm sure. But I don't think money is an issue for Josh Harris. So, it was a sense of, well, this seemed like this was the way it was going to go for the last couple of weeks, and there's a finality to it. And certainly there is some relief, I think, because, anybody that's lived in this town and been in this town for more than 5 minutes understands the Commanders' hold on the city and kind of the splintering of the fan base over the last 25 years. It's not all because of Dan Snyder, but a whole lot of it is because of Dan Snyder and the toxicity of the franchise that never seems to reach bottom. Every time you think, well, it can't get worse, there's something else that comes out that's worse. So there certainly is a sense of relief that maybe this franchise can sink or swim on its own, just as a football organization. You know what I mean? You just want to judge them as a football team, and now you finally are going to be able to, without having to hold your nose every time they do something good, because you think, well, this will make Snyder look good, and nobody wants that because he's not a good person. He does not seem to be a good person. His behavior is not that of a good person. So, relief, I think, is the overarching emotion that I think most people who've been here for more than a while have today.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that too about the football stuff and with the ulterior motives that feel like are at play, and just can we just focus on the football? And it's yes, finally we can go back to the same quarterback argument we've been having for also 25 years, if not longer. So at least we have that without the distraction over behind the curtain of Snyder. And David, I'll ask you this: when was the first time, or what is your first memory of Dan Snyder, or maybe more aptly, when's the first time you remember having an opinion of Daniel Snyder?
Oh, I guess for me, when he bought the team, I was kind of career and going full throttle with ESPN and kind of had my head down and thought, oh, it's interesting that this guy that's from here and says he's a lifelong fan. He's a young guy, so he's got money, so it looks like this could be good, right? I think all of us thought that. And then I guess it would be 2001 when he started as free agents, and you go, well, you bring in Deion Sanders and Mark Carrier and people like that, and you go, that really is not the way people tend to build NFL teams. We'll see if it works, but I'd be surprised if it worked, because these are all kind of guys that can't really play at the highest level anymore, but they're a name. And so you start to wonder if this guy is just more interested in shiny objects than really allowing, building a football team. And then, the Schottenheimer, firing was just absurd on its face. Like, you just go, wait a minute. He won 8 out of his last 11, with Tony Banks as a starting quarterback. I mean, he got this team to really buy in, and you're firing him? Like, I don't understand. Like they're going in the right direction. And so that was when I think the bloom started coming off the rose pretty quickly.
Yeah, David Aldridge with us, of course, senior columnist from The Athletic, here with us on the Team 980. So let's say old Josh Harris calls his Sixers PR guy and he's like, hey, you got David Aldridge's number? I want to give him a call. I know he's in D.C. now doing a bunch of stuff. He calls you up and says, hey, we're off the record, but I just want to pick your brain. What's the number one thing you'd have me do as the new owner of this team? What would you tell him?
Build a stadium in D.C.
Just like that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think if he wants to be beloved, and he may not want to be beloved. Guys that rich don't really care if they're beloved. They got their own plane. You know what I mean? Like, they're not really interested in flying commercial. But yeah, I mean, I think if he wants to be beloved, he would figure out a way to build a new stadium on that RFK footprint. In consultation with the neighbors in the neighborhood, because that's a lot for a neighborhood to deal with every couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, that would be my suggestion. If you want to be, the man coming in and on a white horse, that would, I think, engender a great deal of happiness, rejoicing amongst a large section of the fan base. Not all, because some people would rather it be in Northern Virginia and some people would rather it be in Maryland. But I think most people would be very pleased with rebuilding on top of RFK Stadium a new, modern stadium that doesn't destroy the footprint of the neighborhood that it's in.
What do you think this means for Ron Rivera, now knowing that it's Harris?
I think it means he's got to win big next year to keep his job. I mean, I don't think that's any state secret, right? Like, I mean, the new owner almost every owner in every sport wants to bring their own people in. They hire. They tend not to deal well with people they inherit. And so, Ron is going to have a monster year this year, this coming season. And we obviously don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, I mean, he's on the clock. Everybody on the football staff is on the clock. They got to have, and it can't be like a 9-8 season, you know what I mean? Like, or an 8-8, another 8-8-1 season. They got to win 10, 11 games, make the playoffs, and probably win a game or two in the playoffs. I think for him to feel secure that he's going to be able to stick around.
Last thing for you real quick, DA. Obviously, Bezos loomed over this whole process, and his ownership would have looked, I mean, who knows what it would have looked like. This guy's got so much money that trying to compare him to any other owner in sports is pointless because there's no one in his range. Do you have any thoughts, feelings on him not ultimately buying it, considering he did hang over this process the whole time, and what it would mean to have the richest owner in sports owning, the biggest team in town?
I always felt, Craig, that, Jeff, I believe this, he owns the Post, but I don't think he considers himself a DC person. I really don't. I think if you look, the coverage is much more national in scope than it is local now at the Post. So, and I've always felt like the move for Bezos, if he wants to get in the NFL, is to buy the Seahawks. He's from Seattle. He obviously, made Amazon into a behemoth while he was in Seattle. And that's a logical thing for him to do if he wants to be an NFL owner. And that team will be sold at some point by the estate of Paul Allen. I mean, that's kind of the estate is set up to sell the rest of the estate, including the NFL team. And so it's a matter of when, not if, that team gets sold. So I've always felt like that was the move to me that would make the most sense for Jeff Bezos if he wants to do it. And I don't know Jeff Bezos at all. I don't know if he loves the NFL. I mean, he's in business with the NFL, but that doesn't mean he loves it. It doesn't mean he wants to own a team. I mean, he looked into this one and obviously passed. So, I don't think that there's regret on his part because he could buy the team anytime he wants by offering $1 billion. You know what I mean? Like, he can do that. He won't, but I'm just saying he has the wherewithal to buy anything he wants to buy, and so when he wants to buy something, he's going to buy it. And I assume that means an NFL team too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense in terms of him. It's going to be curious when he, if he does that, when he gets in the league, what that looks like. But I do think that the Commanders fell in tremendous hands. I think the more that this process went on, the more I was kind of, not as a fan. Like I didn't grow up here. I don't pretend that I did. But someone who certainly has a fairly outsized interest in the team, considering what I do for a living. Wanting this team to go to Josh Harris and seeing, how he runs it, considering how he's run his other teams. So it should be a fun ride. And day one, I guess, is ultimately April 13th, 2023. David Aldridge, you should read his column for sure. He's got a lot more on Harris at The Athletic. So go to The Athletic and read there. David, always appreciate your time. And maybe we'll have you back in a couple weeks to talk NBA playoffs as originally scheduled.
Sure, Craig, my pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. David Aldridge, everybody, senior columnist from The Athletic, or I should say Pro Basketball Hall of Famer. And something DA said in there that I think is really interesting, and in a way makes today, for as big of a day as it is, and it feels big, it feels significant. I feel like there is a bit of an edge still about like, okay, well, it's not finalized. And because we have been burned so many times by Josh Harris, or by Dan Snyder, I should say, before, it's like, well, what, Murphy's Law, what can go wrong? Still, there's time. It's almost like, I don't know, Anthony, if you've ever heard of this. Have you ever heard of the, like, families who have a family member, people that have someone die that they know? And they don't go to the funeral to celebrate the life. They go to the funeral to make sure the person's dead. You ever heard of that?
That's actually crazy. No, I have not heard of that.
I mean, obviously, like they know that they're dead, but it's like, hey, we better go to the funeral to make sure. I want to see that box go into the ground.
It sounds like a scene out of a movie, to be honest.
It does. But I know people who have done it. Like, grandma was terrible. We hated her. She finally croaked. Yeah, we'll go to grandma's funeral, but we're kind of there. It's a family secret. Don't tell this to any of her friends, but we're kind of there to make sure. And that's what this feels like. That's a little bit what it feels like. It's like, we got to celebrate. It's done, right? He's actually dead. That's what today feels like. And I think what David said that I agree with wholeheartedly is like today feels a bit anticlimactic because of that. There isn't some boom official announcement, fireworks, parade. Like it's been a slow roll. It's been a slow roll, including the news yesterday. Like, and some days you could say the most important day in this process is actually April 12th, the day that Jeff Bezos said, no mas, I'm not doing this. And then the next day, the story breaks that it's done, that there's an agreement in place. And, the bid is being finalized to be submitted to the league. And, we thought it was going to be Harris all along. We'll see if we ever find out who that mystery bidder was. We'll see if Canadian Stephen A. stops talking eventually. But, like, there is this anticlimactic nature. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I'll peel back the curtain a little bit. Like, we've obviously been planning for this for a while. Like, it would be recklessly irresponsible for us as professionals not to. That includes what I wrote that I said at the open of the show. Like, those words have been on a page for a while. They've been continually tweaked and updated and, I sat back down, obviously, before the show today. But this is a moment that I've been prepared for a long time because it's been coming for a long time. We were in scramble mode. What was it, like 6 weeks ago? That one weekend where everyone was like, when everyone was like, hey, it's happening. It's, the ball's inside the 5-yard line, like JP said. Grant was saying, hey, if it's if your wife is pregnant, it's time to grab the go bag and go to the hospital. Like, we were scrambling a little bit then because it was like, oh my God, this might happen faster than we thought. But since then, like, been ready. I'm sure David didn't write that column. It's awesome. You should read it. And I'm sure he's been continuing to research it over the last couple of weeks. But I doubt like the skeleton of that column was written today. Just fleshed it out. Because that's the nature of these things. And ironically, in journalism, what a weird analogy I'm about to make. The closest thing I can think of to that is when people write for obituaries. Like, when a famous person is dying and they're old or they're sick, whatever, the person who writes the obituaries for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the kind of places where famous people get obituaries, they don't go, oh, dead, time to write. Like Queen Elizabeth's obituary was probably written in like years ago. And it's just continually updated until she eventually passed away. She was 198, whatever she was, when she died. And that's what this feels like. The era is finally over. The nightmare is over. The obituary can now be shared. But over the last few weeks, it's been written. Doesn't make it any less exciting. Check on. Oh, yep. Now we just got to wait for the Dan Snyder era to proverbially go in the ground. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You can give us a call. It's time. Open up the phones. 301-230-0980. How are you feeling now that we know Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders? 301-230-0980. Your phone calls next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
DC has a new home for your favorite.
It's the Hoffman Show on a lovely day on the Team 980. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301-230-0980. Taking your calls on this historic day in DC sports. The day Dan Snyder agreed to sell the Washington Commanders. Reportedly, it is for $6 billion. Some reports say 5.8. Most of them say 6. $6 billion to Josh Harris, Mitchell Rales, and Magic Johnson. Worth pointing out, / rehashing that Eben Novy-Williams, the man who broke the story for Sportico, he told me in our interview that we aired, when was that, 4:30 today? Yeah, 4:30 today. Eben and I actually talked a little bit earlier, like 2:15, which, by the way, I will also say this just real quick. This is why you subscribe to our digital outlets. Obviously, like, Chris did a great job covering everything on the air, but, like, the beauty of modern media is that we can do a lot of different stuff at once, and so rather than wait to get Eben on at 4 o'clock, like, I talked to him at 2:15, and we immediately put the interview up on our YouTube page. And I think, Anthony, is it up on our podcast
Yes,
feed?
sir.
It's up there. It's on the Take Command feed. Like, we instantly bang, 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 bang. So that, needless to say, it is worth it if you are not subscribed to the Hoffman Show podcast feed, to Take Command, to one of, if not all of our YouTube pages. YouTube.com/@theteam980 is the new page for the station. Right now, it's mostly stuff from us, but soon we'll be expanding. But also, YouTube.com/@Craig Hoffman, my page. We put stuff up predominantly there as well. It's worth it because on a day like today, you might just get something bonus in the most timely fashion possible. So that's why you subscribe, so you don't miss anything. But Eben told us in that interview that there will likely be other minority partners as well, which I think is really important here. And again, how you feeling? Go ahead. Give us a call. We've been yapping all show. It's time for you. 301-230-0980 as you're driving around on your way home, getting to celebrate today. 301-230-0980. But the reason that the continued expansion of this ownership group to as many people with as much money as possible is really important is this is a massive infrastructure project. Anthony, we finally did it.
We did indeed.
You don't know what we did, though. You're just like, yeah, we did. You don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm thinking you're talking about Dan almost being there and selling the team.
No.
No, you're talking about subscribers.
No, we didn't talk about subscribers. I know you're busy in there producing, but Anthony, we did it. It's finally Infrastructure Week. That's a big political nerd joke.
That just went over my head.
Yep. Okay. Goodbye, Anthony. Okay. We tried. The infrastructure needed in this franchise has been built up. I will give Jason Wright a ton of credit here. He has done a good job of building up a lot of it over the last couple of years. And Ron Rivera, to an extent, has built up some on the football side. But I think what Josh Harris is about to do is revamp this entire organization. Because when we talk about like an analytics department, and you look at what the Sixers have done in the NBA, where Harris is the owner and they are a leader in that with Daryl Morey. They were a leader with that initially with Sam Hinkie and that front office. Like, they don't got that here. They have one of the smallest analytics departments in the league. And I know Rivera has leaned on it some to make like fourth down decisions, but there are layers to the analytic movement within the NFL that are way, way, way deeper that this organization has not put the resources towards that can help. And it's going to take a coach, by the way, who's willing to be involved with that stuff. And I don't know if Rivera is ultimately going to be that guy. He's been open to changes in philosophy and learning more. And I'm not going to sit here and dump on Ron because it's not like he's completely closed-minded, but it's just a different era of how to think about the game. And, obviously there will be many coaches or multiple coaches in Josh Harris's tenure. That is the nature of the NFL. Rarely do you have a Belichick who's in place for 20 years in one place, but there is a huge internal in the football department, how the team is run, who is empowered, what kind of data is acquired and used. There's a whole infrastructure change that's going to need to happen, and that stuff costs money. It costs human resources. It costs hiring very smart, capable, talented people and giving them top-flight technology and equipment to do the things that they want. Then there is the physical infrastructure. The practice facility stinks. I know everyone wants to say the number one thing is a stadium, and you ain't wrong that it's high on the list. But I would argue the practice facility is more important. And the simple reason is you work at your home stadium 10 times a year. And not to say it's not really important, because it's where your fans experience the game. It is a statement of kind of who you are as a franchise in a lot of ways. The Cowboys, we are the big, shiny leaders, so we built the state-of-the-art stadium that all other stadiums are trying to live up to. And L.A. is okay, we see you, Dallas, and we're going to do it an L.A. way, and they build SoFi. Minnesota's built a stadium that's incredible, and their practice facility and the way they've done business is top flight. Who you are in a lot of ways is reflected in your stadium. The Oakland Raiders were a team that needed to move. Now they're in Vegas. They do things a little differently, and they've got a sick stadium to show for it. But not to say the Raiders haven't had some problems, but that's a different conversation for a different show. Point is, you're there 10 times a year as a football team to play games. 9 regular season games, 1 preseason game, or 8 and 2, depending on the year now with the 17-game schedule. You are at your practice facility over 100 days a year. Your coaches are there 200 to 300 days a year. You're there for every practice. You're there for every OTA. You're there for and now most teams, every training camp practice, including this one. It is your office. I don't really know what the equivalent to other jobs is, because there aren't a lot of jobs that practice one place or jobs that have practice and then events. I mean, I guess if you're an events team, if you build things for massive trade shows, your office space is really important, and then you take your show on the road to the actual event. But there just aren't a lot of jobs where you have this dynamic. Most of the time, your office is your office. And for a football team, the office is the practice facility, and theirs isn't good enough. They do not have the space. They have been knocking down walls to try to make better meeting rooms, and they've upgraded, and they deserve whatever level of credit they get for continuing to try to chip away around the margins to make this thing better in the meantime. But it's that practice facility puts them behind in free agency. It puts them behind in what their coaches are capable of doing. Their nutrition and weight room and all that kind of stuff is limited. They do a good job within their capabilities, but they just don't have the space to do it the way other teams do it, which is better. And especially when you've got guys that are used to coming in from Alabama or SEC, Pac-12, ACC schools that have facilities that blow other pro teams that are good out of the water. It's such a downgrade. It's this is my pro experience? So that's going to cost money. But the biggest expenditure in terms of the infrastructure project, if you will, is obviously a stadium. And that's going to involve bureaucracy and political red tape. It's going to involve permits and all kinds of stuff before you get to the actual construction. So ultimately, the best thing that can happen is the most people get involved with the most money, because the way you can blow through a lot of that stuff and get things done quickly and efficiently is by having the resources to do it. And it's going to involve a lot of cash, a lot of financing, and the more people you have to finance and the more people you have to put forward cash, the better. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls. How you feeling today? 301-230-0980. Let's get to one real quick before we go to break. Come back, get to the rest. Lap, new out here from you today. What's up, man? How you feeling on this day where Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders?
What's up, Ant? Selfies, Ant? Hey, man, I'm pumped, man. Hey, all them fans, man, that didn't want to be with the team because of the owner and the name change, man. Come on back, man. We got room for you, man. Show some love, man, and I'm excited. So let's get the party started. Everybody just celebrate, get ready for the ride. I still want Ron Rivera up out of there, but I'll take him, another year. And I'm hoping Bieniemy could be the coach. And I'm agreeing with you too, Craig. I think we need to get that practice facility, man, because it's really sad that all these college programs got better facilities than us, especially when we drafting players from, some of those big schools, man, that have those nice facilities, man. But I'm excited, man, and we'll see what happens. I hope it's a weight off of everybody's shoulder, especially the players. I really want to see Sam Howell and Terry and just everybody, man, just ball out this year, man, and have a chip on their shoulder, something to prove, man. So it's a good thing, man, and it's so surreal though. It's just like, what else is it? You know what I'm saying? But I'm just glad that it's done, and they can get it done before the meeting and get it done before the draft, and it just will be a good off season to go into, man, having that off your shoulders. So we'll see, man. I look forward to the rest of the calls, man. A great show as always, Craig. Keep up the good work, man.
I appreciate you, Lap. Thanks for calling, buddy. 301-230-0980. More of your calls as we go here. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. First, though, let's tell you what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. I see some of y'all on here. Got the old stream monitor up. We got some folks. Hi, everybody. All right, you can catch us there, of course, live each and every day. I want to play something real quick from Mina Kimes, because I think she's one of the smartest people in sports media, certainly covering the NFL. I value her perspective greatly. And we'll take more of your calls in a second as well. 301-230-0980. Very simple. How you feeling on this day that Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders? We'll also recap some of our chat earlier if you missed it with Eben Novy-Williams at the top of the hour. Plus, do you want to see this team rebranded? We'll get into that in the 6 o'clock hour as well. But I thought this was extremely poignant. This from not that long ago, about an hour ago, on NFL Live from Mina Kimes on ESPN.
It is massive, not just for this team and its tortured fan base, but for the entire NFL. I mean, Laura, we're not talking about the turning of a page here. We're talking about the closing of a book that will go down as one of the most shameful records of any owner in any professional sport, as you laid out there with that timeline, which only touches on some of it. I mean, with Daniel Snyder, we're talking about an owner who oversaw a culture in Washington that was toxic and predatory. This was widely reported on and investigated, who has been accused of directly facilitating that culture, who has been accused of sexual assault himself, by the way, as well as reportedly harassing and intimidating witnesses and reporters. An owner who is currently facing federal investigations for some of these charges, as well as the financial misbehavior, as well as a new, not like another investigation from the NFL itself. And that is just one thing I do want to highlight, because even if this sale does go through and Daniel Snyder is no longer an NFL owner, I do think it is imperative that the NFL finishes that investigation and releases it, because if they do care about transparency and some of the values that they've been espousing as they continue with this investigation, releasing it becomes paramount in my mind.
I agree with that point. I don't know if that's necessarily a story we need to get too much into today in terms of what should happen next with these investigations. Like, obviously the federal investigation should continue because, like, they're investigating crimes. And tax evasion and like really important stuff, and that's much bigger than football, that, you know, certainly can affect a football organization if money's being funneled away from it in the wrong ways, and that hurts your ability to do business, but like also affects other things. So there's that. The NFL, I do think, like, if the NFL doesn't put out the Mary Jo White report, like, that's considering the amount of yapping they've done and talking about transparency, like if they want to be taken seriously as a entity that can ever investigate itself, like, they should do that. But we can talk about that more later. I just think what Mina does there is such a great job of highlighting just the depth of what we're talking about here. This is not a team that's just been bad, like sad, like almost in a movie sense for a long time. I'm trying to think of a good, like, for years, what the Rays were in baseball. Obviously, the Rays now are arguably the best team in the sport. But for years, it was like, oh, yeah, that team in Tampa that loses 115 games a year. There's certainly been, the Lions forever were terrible in the NFL. Obviously, the Bears have been bad. But some of those teams have had more, mediocre seasons, at least as of late. And, hey, the Lions damn near made the playoffs last year. But you have these teams that go for long periods of time of just being wholly ineffective as sporting entities. And in the American sports model, like, they're a drag on the league because it's a team that could be doing more that is not the Browns or the Bengals forever, right? Teams that just flat out stink. And maybe there's a little bit of miscreants happening, a little bit of, oh, yeah, that owner's not the best. Like, they're pretty cheap. But at the end of the day, someone's got to finish last. Like, every year, you can't have perfect parity where, everyone's on a wheel and you go 1 through 32. And, if you do on average every 32 years, every team would finish 16th because they'd have an even mix of first place and last place and middle of the pack just above, middle of the pack just below finishes. Like, that's just not realistic in a sporting landscape. Where there's, players that stay on teams for more than 1 year. Like, LeBron James' team is always going to finish from 2000 and, about 5 until now is always going to finish above average to very above average, aka in the NBA Finals for 8 straight years from 12 to 2020. But what happened here was so much worse than that. This wasn't a team that was like, oh man, they used to be good and now they're bad. This is unfortunate. It sucks that they suck. This was a true stain on the league. Like, this was Dan Snyder's ownership exposed the NFL to problems that no one should ever be exposed to if they're just going about business like professionals. And that, I think, is important to remember here, the depth of the hole that pretty instantaneously this team is out of. Or I shouldn't say this team, because the football operation's in really no different place today than it was yesterday. And it will be in no different place the day that Josh Harris signs on the dotted line. It will still be Ron Rivera's team that he has built, and they will go forth this year with a new owner at the helm for sure. And who knows, maybe Josh Harris comes in on day one and says, go sign Lamar Jackson to this, and we're going to cut all the guys that we have to. I don't care. I've done the... is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? Hell no. But realistically, this is the same football team as it was last week. And the same football team that it was next week. Or that it will be next week. 3 weeks from now is a different story, because then we'll be talking about the draft. 3 weeks from tonight. 2 weeks from tonight. The NFL draft. But the organization is instantly different. The value, the second he sells, goes up because he's not in charge. Because the legal liabilities, because the penchant for embarrassment, because the ineptitude at hiring anybody good enough to do the job they're hired for is no longer there. So that's, in a couple of words, that's nice. More of your calls next. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. First of all, how you feeling? Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Commanders to Josh Harris per multiple reports. How are you feeling? And let's go ahead and open up this Pandora's box. Now that we know that the team is going to be sold and Dan Snyder's not going to be in charge, would you like to see a new team name, a rebrand once again? No, you cannot go back to the old one, but would you like a new one? 301-230-0980, The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, live on the free Odyssey app and streaming on video. You can watch us, on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980. Hey, I'm Craig Hoffman.
And I'm...
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. So, questions we're asking this hour. 1, how you feeling? 2, would you like a rebrand?
We are the Commanders.
I will say this. If they go the rebrand route, please, can someone do some consultation on having a different announcement strategy? We got to do better. I mean, if you want to involve Doug Williams, I'm all for it. It just can't be a toss saying, hey, what's the new team name?
We are the Commanders.
We got to do better than that. That's all I'm saying. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. I just be honest with the audience. We got no one on the lines right now. Oh, there we go. We got some people starting to call now. I'm stunned. I thought we would just instantly bang. This is the moment we've been waiting for. Apparently, y'all want to hear me yap. 301-230-0980. Again, we'll take some calls here in a second. How you feeling? And would you like to see a rebrand? I was told at some point during the rebrand process, this wasn't exactly a great source, so it's not like I'm reporting this, but that the Commander's name tested really poorly, but Dan really wanted it. And that's why I kind of lean towards, hey, let's explore that route. We can go down that road as the hour goes here, but we got some calls now, so let's get to the phones. Again, 301-230-0980. Let's go to Mike in Columbia. Mike, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thank you, man. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really happy about it. I just wish it could be done, and I know this is really out there, but I wish we could get rid of Rivera before this draft, or Harris would come in and have his people come in. This thing will be finalized and tell them to stand back. So I'm happy, though. The second half of this is getting rid of him, and let's just start anew. So thank you for letting me share. I am excited about it, but the job's not totally done yet until we get rid of him. Thank you, man.
Thanks, Mike. Getting rid of a coach at this stage of the offseason is wholly and totally impractical. You are so deep into your draft process that it would be fair, and your offseason. Like, you built your staff. Your staff has built their staff. Like, obviously Ron hired Bieniemy, and I know a lot of people would be like, well, just elevate Bieniemy. That's just not how this works. That's not to say that Rivera is the right guy long-term and that Josh Harris might not already know that. But there is a logistical element of like, hey, we gotta like field a team this year. We have to, the draft doesn't move because the Commanders get bought. And by the way, this thing's not going to be finalized till after the draft anyway. So you're telling me you're going to go through an entire offseason, an entire draft process, entire everything, get to OTAs. And actually, at that point, by the end of May, you're already halfway through OTAs and fire your head coach then? No, that's crazy. It's crazy talk. But I do think the fit between Josh Harris and Ron Rivera is a really interesting one. Rivera has obviously talked or been through this once before. He's actually one of the people I would love to talk to most about this, is like, hey, what happens when an ownership change occurs? Especially considering that you are not just the head coach here. Like, you're the president of football operations. So we'll see what we'll see what happens in terms of the kind of dynamic there of Ron being the senior executive and the actual power structure that happens when Harris comes in. Because what Josh could do, now we're on a first name basis, just it's me and Josh. What Josh Harris could do is hire an executive, whatever, a CEO of football operations, an executive officer, a COO, whatever C-suite level, someone above Ron Rivera, and say, you're in charge. Don't do anything crazy, but, like, you're in charge. And as the season goes forward, like, Rivera's going to have less power. You know, you could change GMs in the offseason. That's not unheard of. There's a thought, a rumor that's floating out of Houston that Nick Caserio might step down after the draft and return to New England. And if that's the case, then, you know, that would make sense. Scouts tend to get fired. Like, Black Monday is the day after the regular season for coaches. It's the day after the draft for scouts. Because you can't do it mid-process. It's you need those evaluations. Someone's got to do them. You can't just leave a region uncovered. And so for Harris, when he comes in, I would also want to see hands-on how it goes. Because this is also a financial thing. Like, we've talked about this multiple times. Josh Harris is spending a lot of money on this. And Mitchell Rales and Magic Johnson and, you know, especially Rales and Harris, and especially Harris, spending so much money on this project, not only to buy the team, but to buy a stadium. And, you know, at that point, the price of a coach contract is not very much, but, like, if Ron's making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, you bet your bottom dollar and all of Josh Harris's dollars that he does not want to have to pay out Ron Rivera's contract and then hire the next guy who also costs, you know, $8 to $10 million a year. That's just not a smart way to run a business. So if he can get by with Rivera in the meantime and build some other infrastructure, front office-wise, whatever, around, depending on whose contract is where with the Martys and if he likes those guys or not, he's going to do that. And so I understand there's a lot of people that have their mind made up on Rivera. And look, if it was up to me and I wasn't looking at contracts, like, would I have hired someone else this offseason? Probably. I think Ron's done a lot of good stuff here. I don't know that he's the right guy to get you to that next level. I do think he's given himself the best chance by hiring Eric Bieniemy. And I do think that he is set up now to potentially succeed. So if that's the case, then, like, how critical, like, you can be critical of the last couple of years, but hey, you get to the point where it could work and then you let go. Hey, he got himself out of the hole, and now that he's back up top, you're going to play whack-a-mole and knock him back down. So I think it's perfectly fair to Rivera to let him play out this year, and you sink or you swim. And at that point, you have 1 year left on the deal, and that's a lot easier to swallow for Harris and company, and they'll have been set for a year. They not only get to see the results, but they get to see the behind-the-scenes of the process. And you also are, you know, if Sam Howell's not any good, like, you're starting over fresh next year, and you actually get to do something in what will essentially be year one of your ownership, your first offseason, that Dan Snyder hasn't done in well over a decade, which is align a coach and a quarterback. The closest he's come is Robert and the Shanahans, but Robert was to a point imposed on the Shanahans under circumstances, the trade and the cap penalties, and then the power dynamics that were shifted by Snyder in a way that was never going to succeed. And if Sam's good, well, then, you know, maybe Ron's sticking around, and we'll see how that all goes. Or maybe he moves to front office role and they hire Bieniemy. Like, the options are there, but I think if you're focused on a head coach today, then you're probably a little too narrowly focused. I think the biggest thing here is that, you know, the guy who's turned your franchise from a crown jewel of the NFL and something to be proud of into something that almost, you know, the insignia is a badge of shame. That guy's gone, or is soon to be gone, pending goneness. And that's obviously a day worth celebrating. We'll take some more of your calls as we go. 301-230-0980. Plus, a good friend of the show a good friend of mine who is a great voice who's been on the Team 980 for years, not currently on except for at nights when he's nationally syndicated, is going to stop by the studio. So that's coming up as well. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Mystery guest next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And if you're watching us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980, you see a familiar face. Now, ladies and gentlemen, familiar voice here on the Team 980. It's Nick Ashew, everybody.
God, it is a glorious day, isn't it? It is a day I thought that would never happen, though I will tell you this right off the bat. I'm just going to wait to fully celebrate.
Yeah, you're one of those,
cautious.
Huh?
I have seen too many times where we thought we were getting to that next step, and yes, this is by far the farthest it's ever gone with ownership changing finally in Washington. But I'm just going to wait, and when the pen is actually put to paper, or DocuSign, because I'm sure he's not going to show up. Right. He's going to handle it from his yacht somewhere out.
Yeah, hey, how's the thing was supposed to get done today? The Wi-Fi on the yacht's a little spotty, so we gotta
be able to buy some better Wi-Fi once it's all said and done. But no, I will be popping champagne on BetMGM tonight, and it will be a celebration. So I've already got it on ice, ready to go for when it's officially official, and there's no way that this guy can ever come back.
Yeah. By the way, BetMGM tonight, most weeknights here on the Team 980. We are going to be live and local, actually, tonight. Our guy Toby's going to be coming over, so you can still catch Nick, of course, on the Odyssey app and everybody there, and they do a great job every night. And again, most nights this show is on the Team 980, but we get to get your voice here now in the 6 o'clock hour. So, bam. I know you have like the reserved feeling, just because I made the analogy earlier that it's like the folks who go to the funeral to make sure the body, like they're actually dead.
Yes,
it's that / anyone who's scared that their significant other might run at the altar. Like all those analogies, I get fine, but like the reality is he's going to sell and is most likely to be to Josh Harris. I know you're a big NBA guy as well. We actually we did like 4 episodes of an NBA podcast together once. Way back in the day.
We did. That was a long time ago. I forgot about that.
Was. So did I until right now.
Everything changed. Yeah.
When you know that it's going to be Harris, how do you feel about that part of it?
Listen, first off, we know that pretty much anybody is better than what we had. And I say pretty much because you never know, right?
Sure.
But it was pretty damn bad. I'm excited and I'm optimistic, and he's somebody that, look, the Sixers are a good organization. Say what you want about Doc Rivers, or say what you want about James Harden and his effort in the playoffs. The reality of it is that is a well-run team that has been a playoff and really a contender for years now, and has the NBA MVP, in my opinion, in Joel Embiid. It should be Joel Embiid. But that being said, it's going to breathe new life into this organization. And listen, I'm with you on this. Like, deep down, like, things don't go this far without it. It's just, there's the logical side of me, and then there's the fan side of me, and the fan side is just going, hold on, I don't need to get my heart broken again with this just yet. But it's going to be completely different. I think it'll take some fans some time to really just accept it. Some may still hate the name, so that could be an issue. Some have that. But you're going to have just a new energy and just capable business operations now, and not a toxic workplace. Now, fans weren't privy to a lot of the information that was obviously going on until it all leaked and came out in all the different reports with what was going on behind the scenes. But attitude reflects leadership, right? I've always loved that quote from Remember the Titans. I think it's one of the best quotes, and it just describes so many things like this, where the attitude at the very top was Dan Snyder, and that trickled down to everybody else in the organization, and you saw it cheaply run. You saw poor attitudes, and you saw that then result with not just what's going on the field, but we saw the grades for the team, and that was just another telling sign of, like, you can't have this continue with somebody that's that bad. It's a little surreal. I'm still a little numb, but I finally can sit back and go, I can just root for this team again and not go, I love this team, but there's still that owner, and I don't want to see him be successful.
Right. I mean, that is such a huge thing. Like, I don't know how much you felt that. So I'll ask you, like, how much did you feel like the moral conundrum? Like, I feel like, for us, those of us that have been around the team, like, there was always a little bit more knowledge than what was public. Whether that was, some people will criticize that. It's like, well, why didn't you make it public? It's like, well, there's a threshold of being able to report something that we didn't necessarily have it there, but you just heard a lot of stuff. There's a lot of smoke.
Of course,
if we had seen a fire, we'd be like, hey, look, there's a fire.
Right.
But there's a lot of smoke. But once the Washington Post and New York Times start reporting what they start reporting, I had a couple of things along the way. So many others reported various stories, and so many people shared their stories. Once you got to that threshold, that there's no denying it, like, this is a bad dude who runs a bad place, and a lot of people got hurt. How much were you as a fan personally affected by kind of the moral conundrum of rooting for this team? And thus, that how do you feel about that Band-Aid finally being ripped off and going like, wow, the wound's healed?
It's certainly, it's It was tougher once you started hearing more of the information that was coming out by, like you said, all of those different reports that came out. I'd certainly heard stuff over the years. I never covered the team. So for me, it's over the years I've learned you can talk to people and they know you're not a reporter and you can get context on things for shows, and it allows you to get a background on something without actually having to fully report it. Once we got to the point where you're getting more and more of the details, I mean, all you could do was root for, in my eyes, it was rooting for failure so he'd be pushed out, because the more of a dumpster fire everything was, the more likely they were going to start losing money. It was going to start turning bad within the group of owners that are there. Now, what we know in the end is money dictates a lot of this. Like, let's be honest with ourselves here.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different, and everybody knows the reports out there and what's, in terms of cooking the books and all that. Like, that's when the gears start really turning. The problem for me was that you at least had, and Ryan Horvath, who's my co-host on BetMGM tonight, always jokes when I say this, but I said at least the culture started to change within the team with Ron Rivera there. Like, Ron Rivera's not the guy to lead them to a Super Bowl, but he is the guy to go in there and clean up the mess that had been there for so long. So I did always find myself torn, because I sat there going, but at least Rivera's cleaning this up, and I don't want them to be a punchline, a dumpster fire, a joke, the laughing stock of the NFL, the laughing stock of the sports world that they've been for so long. But I also know that if things turn around with Dan Snyder still the owner, and he even just fades into the background, there's still going to be that, everybody's going to forget about him, and then you just move forward with him staying there.
Right, and that was the thing that was kind of weird, I would say, about the last couple of years. Nick Ashew's with us, of course, a longtime host here on the Team 980, now host of BetMGM tonight on the BetQL network. It was almost like a sports washing element. That's a term that's become very popular in the last couple of years, especially around what happened in Qatar with the World Cup. But there was an element of, when Ron would talk about certain things, or when Jason Wright would be like, well, we're fixing this. And it's like,
right,
you are fixing it, but it's also still kind of covering up and letting off the hook the guy who was in charge. And I also just think that there's like a settling that's probably going to come. And I actually wonder how long it's going to take the fan base to kind of settle into this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you're the Sixers under Josh Harris, you can trust that good decisions will be made, and you don't have to worry about the other stuff. And because it has not been that way on both fronts for so long, you knew there was a bunch of stuff happening that you didn't quite fully know, but like it was bad, and the team was going to throw up over itself at every turn. Being a fan has been such a miserable experience.
And I think awful. Yeah.
And I think like that kind of leads to where you're at right now, where you're like, this is the day we hold our breath and hope that it doesn't go badly.
It's like right now you're waiting for a game-winning touchdown in the NFC Championship game. There's no time left on the clock, but you want to make sure he actually broke the plane. I just want to make sure they broke the plane, and this is actually going to be a touchdown, and we're going to be free and clear, and there's nothing we can do about it, and we'll never see the guy again or hear his name again, unless it's in a court of law, which I'm okay with. That's totally fine. It's one of those where if you look now, it's still very difficult to get owners out of these types of positions, and it's not just the NFL. The NBA's been a little better about getting guys out, as we've seen. Owners have too much power. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in professional sports. And I understand that there's a limit there, and we call them owners. You can call them team governors in the NBA if you want to do that. But the reality of it is they have power, and they have a lot of it. And it's a good old boys club, and they'll take care of each other, because a lot of them don't want anything about them coming out if they're hiding something. And that's one of the big problems. So you as a fan base, the only thing you could do, I say this for years on this station, everywhere else, that one power you actually have as fans is to stop showing up and stop giving that ownership group or that owner your money. That's the only way you make a point, is to say, you're not getting my money. And when the evaluation of this team started to drop year after year and the attendance continued to plummet, you were starting to see at least a little bit, like eyes weren't totally open, but they were squinting. They're coming out of this long, deep Cinderella sleep, and they're waking up going, it's not Cinderella, whatever it is, you know what I mean. Whatever, did Cinderella sleep?
Sleeping
Beauty slept. Yeah, I should know this. I should anyway.
Sleeping Beauty.
You know what I mean. It's been a very busy, emotionally trying
you have
day.
4 hours of radio to do tonight.
I know.
You cannot be Sleeping Beauty. You must wake up.
Yeah, I'll do my best. This is my warm up. This gets the blood pumping right now. But
Anthony, our show's a warm up now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, yeah, it's a segment versus 4 hours, so yeah, it has to be a warm up.
Fair enough. You were saying Sleeping Beauty?
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty. Sure, there you go. But you started to see a little bit of that movement where people are understanding. What I always try to explain to people too is it doesn't make you a bad fan if you say this team is horrible and it's horribly run and I'm not going to show up to games. It actually makes you a good fan because you actually have some self-pride. You realize they're not worth my time. I want to see the team win, but I'm not going to then give my hard-earned money to these owners that treat us like an ATM and don't do the things that need to be done to turn this around, to build up a successful organization. Now, it's one thing if a team is rebuilding. You know what it's going to be like. The Nationals right now, we get it. We know what's going on with them. Also, they need to sell the team there, too, so they can go out and actually bring some talent in. But you understand that that's a rebuild. They won a World Series. You get all that. It's another thing if you're sitting there, though, and you're going, I don't know what the direction of this is, and ownership doesn't care. And that's the problem we've had.
So you want to come back and talk about the Wizards? No. Anthony, I almost made it. I almost made it through the whole show without taking a pot shot. Today was almost the day.
They are
we don't have to, we're out of time.
Spinning their wheels in the mud of NBA purgatory year after year, my friend, and they don't care.
No, they don't.
They
don't. But we'll talk about that another time.
Another time.
What do you have coming up on BetMGM tonight?
Well, we will be talking about this at the beginning of our show. There's no question. Looking ahead to some of the the NBA playoffs, and we've got one more play-in game left. A little bit of baseball there. John Heyman's on the show tonight. Bill Ryder from CBS Sports will join us too. So loaded show. A lot of stuff going on.
Cool. Again, tonight you'll have to catch that on the Odyssey app. You guys also stream online, right?
Yep. We're on Twitch and YouTube.
There you go.
All there. Yep.
So make sure you catch that there. Most nice BetMGM tonight here on the Team 980. We are live and local. Our guy Toby's going to take over at 7 o'clock, taking your calls on the sale agreement of the Washington Commanders. Nick Ashew, everybody. More of your calls next. 301-230-0980. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Woo! What a day. What a day. What a day. Of course, streaming live on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/@theteam980. Oh, you can also, by the way, well, the calls have been a little light today. People driving around doing whatever. Just want to hear us and our guests, which is a good choice. We had some great ones today. Thanks to Nick Ashew for popping by. David Aldridge was great as well. But also, a cool feature of watching on YouTube, if that's what you choose to do, is there also is a chat feature that we're monitoring as well. So you can say what's up in the YouTube chat as well. Earlier on in the show today, Eben Novy-Williams joined us, who is the man who broke the news, and this is what he had to say about the deal itself being done and why ultimately it got to the point that he felt comfortable reporting it.
Deal has been reached, and Craig, I'm expecting this to move fairly quickly from here, get the lawyers finalizing the little details, get it to the league, and I wouldn't be shocked if this is announced in the next early next week would be my guess. And yeah, what a process. I know you've been covering it more than almost anybody. Such a bizarre situation given everything that Dan has been through, what he is facing moving forward, the way the league has treated him, the various bidders. Jeff Bezos, is he interested, is he not? A truly bizarre process, but in the end, the group that has been there since the beginning and was probably the realest of all of them ends up being the group that gets this deal done at $6 billion.
So that was Eben Novy-Williams joining us earlier in the show. And if you're like, what is the music in the background? Did Eben just chilling at home, not able to turn his background? He was actually in the airport in Charleston. I can't remember ever interviewing someone in an airport before. I will say, Anthony, back in the days when I was on the beat covering the team, I did many interviews from airports. The worst ones was when I had to be on with the Junkies early, after the day after a road game. I remember there was one that I think I did from like the Seattle airport at an ungodly time. Because remember, the Junkies are on 6 to 10 a.m. I was in Seattle, which is on West Coast time.
Oh my God, 3 a.m.? Or no,
no, it was towards the end of the show. But like I had an early
still
flight.
Early, yeah.
So it was like
gracious.
I was like, I think my flight was like at 7:30, which would have been 10:30 Eastern, and I was like, hey guys, like I'll call me on the way to the airport.
Yeah, that's early, man. Good gracious, man.
It was it was very early. I don't think I ever did one on although I might have. The worst would have been if I ever did a red eye after I landed. Like not up all night, but kind of.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rough time. But Eben was just chilling in the Charleston airport. He had a whole flight deal. But he was nice enough to pop down and wherever he was at the terminal and sit with us. The whole interview, by the way, is on YouTube. If you want to watch it, get the Charleston Airport background. YouTube.com/@Craig Hoffman, YouTube.com/@theteam980. Eben also had obviously more to say about the deal. And the impetus for this in terms of the timing in a lot of ways was Jeff Bezos saying like, no, I'm not bidding. And, you know, we had Teddy Schleifer on the show yesterday talking about how that process all went. But what level of coincidence, or perhaps not, was it that the day after Bezos says, I'm out, this deal gets done? Here was Eben.
Yeah, I think the way that Josh and Tillman approached this was fairly similar. They just maybe had slightly different prices. I don't know for sure 100%.
Quick pause for better hosting. Tillman Fertitta, who also, by the way, came out yesterday and said on CNBC that he had bid and it wasn't worth the price that it was going for in his mind. So hence the Tillman Fertitta reference. Josh here, of course, Josh Harris, the man who ultimately wins the bidding.
Yeah, I think the way that Josh and Tillman approached this was fairly similar. They just maybe had slightly different prices. I don't know for sure 100% that Josh was the last group or the only group fully at the table, but I don't get the sense that there was a lot of them. And the Jeff Bezos question obviously loomed over this for so long. He's so rich and he's in such a different position that he doesn't have to go through, as you and I have talked about, doesn't have to go through any of the processes. So the fact that he had not been engaged at all didn't mean that he couldn't call up the day today or tomorrow and get that deal done. It seemed like once definitively that Dan and his people understood that was not going to come from Jeff. I do think that made this process, I think, fairly simple. You look at who you have, you look at how many people are real, and if it's just Josh, again, that makes this process even simpler. So in the end, I don't know exactly how many bidders or how many people were real, fully financed, or whether Tillman came with an offer but didn't have all the money and just didn't feel like it was worth going down that process. I don't know, but Josh has been the group that people have been talking about the most and been there through this process, and I don't think that his $6 billion, probably maybe a little bit higher than his original offer, but knowing Josh and the way that he invests, he's not someone who's going to, really splurge more than what he thinks an asset's worth. I can't imagine he went too much higher than he was a couple months ago.
Of course, the number that Eben reported is 6. Darren Haynes reported it was 5.8. Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, among those reporting that it's 6.05 billion. My guess is they're all just different numbers that are, whether it's a base, a little bit of this, if this happens, a little bit of that, if that happens, it's somewhere in that range, which is crazy because we're talking, the difference between 5.8 and 6 is $200 million. I don't want to be flippant about $200 million, but that's just kind of where we are. All right, we'll hear a little bit more from Eben as we wrap up the show. Maybe a couple other sound bites and real things. I don't know what else we got. It's obviously been the story that we spent the entirety of the show on. Want to sneak in one more call? We can too. 301-230-0980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Thanks for joining us on a historic day in DC sports. Appreciate everyone as well checking out the show on the stream. Color Guppies getting in the chat as well. What up? He says goodbye, Snyder. Goodbye. All right. So let's get to this last little bit of sound from Eben Novi Williams, who joined us earlier. Anthony, do we have anything else for Real Things? We played the sound from Mina earlier. We got any other things?
Yeah, we got a couple.
Oh, okay. Are they like funny, typical Real Things? Are they Snyder adjacent? What do we got?
So we have one is funny for sure.
What's the funny one?
The funny one is Zach LaVine lobbying for DeMar DeRozan's daughter DR to get a hall pass so that she can be at the game tomorrow.
Oh, that's good. I don't see that one in the folder yet.
Yeah.
So you're working on that one. Okay, we got some CJ McCollum too.
Yep.
Real quick though, Eben Novi Williams, who joined us earlier from Sportico, he had I asked him, the last thing I asked him, I would fully recommend anybody watching or listening to go check out the full interview, whether you're watching it on YouTube or catch it in our podcast feed. Rewind as well on the Odyssey app. 4:30 segment from today's show. The last thing I asked him was what hurdles remain now between this agreement that he was the first to report on and this ultimately being done and finalized.
From what I understand, the lawyers currently, as you and I are talking on Thursday, going through kind of the final deal point, getting the nuts and bolts on the legal side done. Once they have an agreed contract that goes to the NFL looks through it, and then they plan to sign it, right? The indemnification is a good question. I don't know exactly where or when in that process things happen. I do know, and you know this as well, a lot of NFL owners like the idea of having a different owner in Washington. So I imagine the league is going to want to move fairly quickly. Josh is very approvable. He is already a limited partner with the Steelers. So to the extent that this is a club that is wary of who they let in, he's already got a foot in the club already. I don't know that much about Mitchell Rails' business, but my general feeling is that when you get to this point where you have an agreement in place, there's a pretty good understanding of what the other owners, what the league are going to feel about the prospective buyers group. So I don't imagine that the approval process being any sort of an issue. I don't imagine it's going to take very long, and I don't think there's going to be any surprises when this group finally does go to the vote and the consideration of all the other owners.
Yeah, you don't get this far down the road to have to turn back. You don't get this far down the road. You know, it's one of those kind of situations where you don't ask the question where you don't know the answer, and that they know the answer for what this is going to be. The answer is Josh Harris is going to be the owner of the Commanders. That'll be voted on and made official in late May in Minneapolis, and it's going to be an exciting day. I mean, this is an exciting day. I don't obviously have 20 minutes to go back through and say everything I said at the top of the show, and there's a reason I said that stuff first. This is an ownership tenure that has been terrible on the field, terrible off the field, and terrible in ways beyond the typical embarrassments in ways that teams embarrass themselves off the field. It's been truly dark. There have been people whose lives have had their courses, changed in negative ways because of Dan Snyder and the people he employed and his ownership and the general ineptitude of the franchise, the malevolence of the franchise, the way it chewed people up and spat them back out with no regard for their humanity. Like this is a truly dark day, serious story in a lot of ways, but it's also just a day of joy because the chapter is closing. Like we've gotten to the end of it, and now we just wait for the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed. All right, last thing we do at the end of every show, we shouldn't make today any kind of exception. It is time for a quick edition of Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, we got one thing we got time for today, and Anthony said this is the funny one, so we're going to go with it. Zach LaVine, on his Bulls teammate DeMar DeRozan's daughter, she should get to go and not have to go to school tomorrow because she helped with the world's greatest free throw defense last night.
What point, DeMar, did you realize that it was your daughter that every single time the Raptors would shoot a free throw, she would be screaming at the top of their lungs and cause them to shoot 50% from the stripe?
Hi, man. Probably not to the end of the second quarter. I had no clue until one of the players told me, jokingly. I had no clue. And ever since then, every time they went to the free throw line, I realized it was her screaming. So I'm glad it worked out. She did her thing.
And now today she's back at school?
Yes, she's back in school. I'm trying to be a responsible parent.
Zach, I mean, are we lobbying at all to get her out of school to be in Miami for this next play-in game?
We're figuring that out in the background. I think the teacher's gonna give her a hall pass for the day.
Oh yeah, right. She might need a little bit of a homework slip, a little bit of an excuse.
That's awesome. Malika Andrews, the interview from NBA Today earlier this afternoon. Also, I don't know, Anthony, if you saw the video of that. That's the first interview I've ever seen from a team plane. I don't know if they were still on the ground or the Wi-Fi is just that good on the Bulls team plane, but that was from the team plane.
Yeah, I never saw that either.
That was crazy. All right. Thanks to everyone who was listening today. A truly historic day, a day we'll never forget. And we got plenty to talk about tomorrow, too. Clinton Yates will be on the show tomorrow. We'll have a big old Friday celebration, the Hoffman Show. We're live and local till midnight tonight. Toby Alter is next.
The Kevin Sheehan Show. Now